John, can you tell us something about moving scenery? The most fundamental piece of scenery, the book seems to say, is a flat, but how do you move those, and what's the terminology that goes with that?
Yeah, especially if you've got a flat that's 20 feet tall. You know, this one's only about 7-8 feet tall, so it's really easy to move just because it's a little smaller, but flats can get really, really tall, really, really big, and you need several people. So how do you communicate to the other person that you might be working with how to move this thing? So one way to move it is to slide it along the floor. Okay, so we're just going to walk that along the floor, and you slide it, back and forth.
And that's called running a flat, according to the book?
Yeah, so that's just running along the floor, and if you've got another person on the other side, tell them, hey, we're going to run this flat stage right, run it stage left. Makes it really easy and keep it from moving. That way you're not lifting it up and trying to move the whole thing back and forth and having it fall over on you.
So what if you do want to get it to the ground? You just lower it down?
Well, sometimes those flats can be really big and awkward to get down to the floor, right? So a safe way to do it is what they call floating a flat. So because these things are just big sails, what they'll do is you say, well, let's float it down that way. And you tell everybody on stage, we're going to float this flat down to the floor and we're going to go this direction. So you start leaning it, and then you just let go of it. And the whole thing goes like a sail and floats its way all the way down. This one goes pretty fast because it's shorter. But if you've got a big flat with a lot of fabric, the whole thing acts like a sail. One of the things that might be a little dangerous about that is the back end might kick up, or the whole thing might start to float down and kind of float on you and shift around. So you might say to your partner, hey, can I have somebody foot that flat while we float it down? So what that means is you're going to take your foot and you're going to put it at the bottom here so that as this floats down, it creates a pivot point and doesn't kick up on you or shift around. So I'm going to float that down while somebody foots it. Really pretty safe. Everybody gets out of the way and the whole thing goes down. And same thing if you've got a big tall flat and you want to get it all the way up. You say to your partner, hey, can you lift that flat while I foot it over here? I'm going to foot it so that it doesn't slide along the floor while he's lifting that. Instead, it's got a pivot point to get it all the way up in the air. And then we grab it, and then we can run it along the floor and get it out of the way into place. Somebody else attaches it to a batten, and away the scenery goes.
Speaking of flats, I see you've got one there, but it seems a little unsteady. How would you hold that upright so it's falling over on stage? What do you use for something like that?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different ways to keep a flat straight anyways. But the theater's come up with a really simple way using jack braces. Jack braces are built much the same way a flat is. You're going to have a 90-degree angle, again with those triangle brackets at either corner, and then you're going to have a diagonal piece. And this would get attached to the side or to the back of your flat, and you can attach it even with hinges so that this whole thing would hinge closed and then take it off stage and store it up against. And then when you need it out on stage, bring that out. And some of them are beveled a little bit so that they don't need anything to stand, that they just kind of hold there and stand. And others are straight up and down that you can put hinges, loose pin hinges on the back of it, and then put a pin in through the hinge because you'll keep half of that hinge always on the floor. And then put a pin into it, and your platform or your flat stays nice and plumb to the floor and supports itself hanging there. So we're here in the classroom, and we've got rigged up here a smaller version of our line set system that's also in the theater that hangs our psych. And we use this for demonstration purposes as well. So if you look at over on your left here, we've got a batten here supported by two lines that go up to the grid. Right? So this is one line set supported by two lines. They go up to pulleys at the top. And they're rigged and they come all the way across and they go to 2 other pulleys at the top. And this would normally be in a traditional proscenium style theater with line sets, where your line sets, your control for them all are, and your arbors would come down. So over here, those 2 lines come down to a clew that's attached to our sandbag as well as our control line. And this has a control line where if I lower the sandbag, my line set goes out. If I raise the sandbag, my line set comes in.
And your sandbag weight is very close to the weight of your pipe, so they're in balance.
Correct. So they're in balance with a little friction. So if I were to add more weight over to here, my sandbag's going in the air, right? So same thing. If I've got a line set that's in on stage, and I've got an arbor up top, and they say, put a bunch of weight on it, and you put, 300, 400, 500 pounds onto that arbor, but you don't put anything onto your line set, what's going to happen? Your arbor is coming down because you just put 500 pounds of weight on here, and that line set's screaming up to the grid. So you always want to make sure your line set and your arbor over here are in balance in weight.
Always at the same time.
I need a little WD-40.
Maintain your balance. That's good advice. Thanks, John.
And they will stack all of these line sets, one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. So you start to get all of this scenery all stacked up, one on top of the other. And it creates really, really nice ways of flying scenery and lights and audio all the way out really easily.
But the audience would only see those flat surfaces going in and out. Perfect. Thanks so much. John, let's talk just a little bit about the cyc and how all this flies. Once more, let's take a look at what's here on the floor. So we have the sandbags, which are counterweighting, and they're all those lines are brought together?
Yep, all the lines come down to what's called a clew, and the clew attaches our 3 lines to our main control line, which at the moment is very slack just because the weight of the sandbags is taking it. So the clew holds the sandbags, or our counterweight, as well as our control line, and then our 3 lines that go up to our batten.
Okay, and then you also have a place you can tie these things off?
Correct.
So that...
And this is a pin rail, so any type of rail in a theater that has a bunch of these pins, which you could either, would be a hardwood dowel that you could drop in, or if they're welded on steel, those are called pin rails. So we've got a small pin rail here in the theater.
And that's a lot like the ship, again, where they would raise and lower sails. So here it goes. And let's go up there real quick and just look at the system that's up high. Hey, John, where are we now?
So we're up on the grid now, and we're standing on the upstage catwalk right up next to the cyc. So we had talked about our 3 lines that tied into the clew from down at the stage level. Those 3 lines I have here that come up, and if you can see in the dark up here, there's 3 shiny pulleys there. You're actually seeing 6 because there's a secondary one. But the ones that are closer to your right are the ones for the cyc. And those 3 pulleys take these 3 lines, send them up, and then send them across to another set of pulleys and at different intervals across the stage. So I've got one at stage right, one at stage left, and one all the way across at stage right. And those take those 3 lines and bring them down to a batten. So our batten here hangs the cyc on it. So this is the top of the cyc that you're looking at here, and the 3 lines, when that sandbags down below are raised up, we gain our more line here, so the whole cyc goes down. When we pull the sandbags down, the whole cyc goes up.
John, one of the other things in moving scenery that they talk about is how you fly drapes in and out. And I notice you've got this Austrian drape up here. Austrian must have something to do with the name for how it moves and gathers and what have you. What can you tell us a little about that arrangement?
In our black box theater, we don't have the fly system, so everything needs to gather if we're flying a piece of scenery out. So we've got this big flat piece of muslin that we need to, as it's raising up, kind of gather itself so that it all tucks away nice and neat behind, in this case, our proscenium that we have in for the show here. And that's raised with a series of different rigging pulleys as well as rings that are into place. So the mechanics of it is over on the side here, I've got a single control line that goes up to a pulley right up at the proscenium there, and then it goes across the grid. So right underneath the grid, it runs across to, I don't know if you guys can see, it's called a clue, that takes this single control line, and as it moves there, you can see those white lines. There's 7 white lines that tie into this single control line. And those 7 lines go to a series of other pulleys on the other side. And as I lower this in, each one of those lines picks up a different part of the Austrian drape here. And they're all attached to a ring at the very bottom of this drape. So at the very, very bottom of the drape is a main control ring, and then going up the drape vertically at each one of those strings is a series of other rings that, as this raises up, it gathers a ring, and either goes up and gathers them, or when it comes in, those rings just kind of stop being the control when it comes in. So the string is only attached to the very, very bottom, and then I've got a series of rings. I think they're at 2-foot intervals that come up to pick up a portion of this drape and gather it 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 some more, all the way up till we get to the grid at 20 feet tall.
That's a lot of rings. Whoo! But what an efficient system. Do you have a counterweight, a sandbag on it, or do you just pull the weight of the drape?
I pull the weight of the drape on this one. There is no counterweight on it.
So it must get heavier as you go.
It does. So as this goes up, we've got a lot more weight up in the air, and it gets much, much heavier. The reason I don't have a weight on it here is because my clue is actually running horizontal as opposed to vertical, and my distance of this rope that travels vertically over here just isn't enough to have a sandbag on here. And even if I did have a sandbag, once I get this drape to the bottom, that sandbag would be at the very top there, and it'd want to pull this very bottom lightweight amount of fabric up into the air. So, because the sandbag is up top and my drape's down at the bottom, so the drape actually wouldn't come down all the way, because that sandbag would be heavier than that last little bit of fabric. So if sandbag comes down, that fabric goes up, and all of a sudden you've got a gap of, 1 foot, 2 foot worth of space underneath this drape.
Tell us a little bit about wagons and how you stop wagons from moving.
Yeah, so a couple different ways. This one is a wagon brake on our 4x8 platform here that's also acting as a wagon to get scenery in and out. And wagon brakes have a handle on them and a mechanism that raises and lowers a foot on here, and the foot has a rubber end to it. So pushing the handle up and bringing that up brings my foot all the way up off the floor, and that way my platform can then roll. I've got 2 wagon brakes on this platform. And that way it won't roll. And then when I get into my spike mark and want to lock it down, I bring my wagon brake down and it locks into place. Now this is a smaller wagon, so I can get away with these smaller wagon brakes on here. But if I've got a really, really big wagon, like the one over here, or a taller wagon, that requires a little bit more, I've got another wagon brake here but it's a little higher up, and this is a bigger platform. It's got more scenery on it at one time. So we're using these heavier duty wagon brakes, but they act the same way, and they raise up as well. Okay, and there's several different variations on wagon brakes, ones that come from the side and come over, but they all have the same feature where they've got a foot that comes down, lines up with your spike mark, plants in the ground, and lifts that wheel off the floor so that it's on the foot, and now it's not moving anywhere. So that's how you get wagons onto stage and then secure them onto stage. Another way you can certainly do that is dropping pins through the platform into the stage itself, but then you're dealing with holes in your stage floor. So.
And in the book, there's a picture of a wagon on wheels with stairs that are screwed onto it, and then when you're done rolling it into place, you take the stairs and drop them. Is that a little bit like the way the stairs were moved for Black Rider?
Yeah, that's the same exact way. That's how we did it for Black Rider in the fall. We had a set of stairs that flipped up onto the platform, and then when we wanted to secure that platform that was wheeling around the stage, we took those stairs, opened them up, and they're acting just like a wagon brake. That extra set of stairs comes down, hits the floor, and then you've got a big solid surface that's on the floor, and the wheels can't really move around too much then. So then you're able to climb the whole stairs, plus the other staircase that is flipped up onto the platform.
Sounds like a great resource to have a textbook like that that tells you wonderful things. I hope everybody's studying their textbooks. Thanks, John.
Yep.